Dear students, in continuation with the previous topics that we have covered, which basically dealt with the conquests of Akbar in the north and in the south, today we'll be focusing on the administration as it was developed by Akbar. Akbar had conceived the state and had also conceived the idea of administration. So, when we try to look into the administrative aspects of the Mughal state, we will have to look into different aspects, like we'll have to look at it as a three-tier administration, then we'll have to look at the revenue administration, then we'll have to look at the military administration and different branches of administration. This will be the area of focus in today's lecture. So today we will be just trying to concentrate on the administration of Akbar. I have a slide which is depicting the court of Akbar, where this was the point from where he had followed a three-tier administration. When I mean three-tier administration, I mean central administration, provincial administration, and village administration. As I've been insisting on the point that one of the most important administrations that was developed, which was centralized, which had a bureaucracy, and which was efficient in the medieval period, was the Mughal administration. And the efficiency of the administration has been very well applauded by many travelers, foreign travelers who have visited the Mughal court. Unlike the Delhi Sultanate state, the Mughal state under Akbar's rule, with the three branches of administration, that is the central administration, the provincial administration, and the village administration, turned itself into a benevolent state. It was not a theocratic state. It was a non-theocratic and benevolent state. When I mean this, I mean benevolent, taking the primary interests of the people into consideration, economic development, urbanization, etc. And theocratic, I mean a state which is not run strictly in accordance to the principles or the sources drawn from religious sources. So that transforms the administration of Akbar into transform the state into a benevolent, non-theocratic state. Now, examining the three different levels of, here I have a map which is showing the divisions. The entire empire that you can see is yellow shaded, and it was mainly it was divided into 15 subas, though you have a presentation of 18 subas in the map. And these subas speak of the central administration, the division of the administration, which was controlled and monitored by central administration. So now taking a look at this next slide, sorry, I have given you an idea of the Mughal administrative system, which we call the central government. The central government was under the control of the emperor, who was assisted by the prime minister or the vakil or the wazir. The next important man was Mir Bakshi or the paymaster general. The third important person was Khan-e-Saman or head of emperor's household department. The next was the chief Qazi or the chief Sadar or the chief judge or the minister of endowments and charity. The Qazi was having 2-3, in the modern context, we can say 2-3 portfolios in his control. And then we have the provincial administration. At the provincial administration also, you have the four representatives of the central administration, where you have Diwan, who is taking care of revenue administration. You have Bakshi, who is taking care of the paymaster, and you have Qazi, who is doing the judge, the disputes that come up at the provincial level, at the provincial levels, resulting from, it can be whether a civil dispute or a non-civil dispute. This Qazi played a very important role. Then you have Amil, or the revenue collector, who was in charge of levying taxes and collecting taxes at the provincial level. And then you have also the Sadar, who was the endowments and charities, who was controlling the endowments and charities. So you have very clearly two levels. And the third level, which I have not shown you in the slide, was the village administration. The village administration was basically in the Panchayat model. Now, trying to give a kind of a idea in terms of explaining the nature of central government, we can say that the central government was, the central administration of the Mughals, the administrative system of the Mughals was very praiseworthy, and it was honored and respected, and loyalty was shown by both the Hindus and Muslims, and both Hindus and Muslims were admitted in the public services. So you can very clearly see when you look at the administrative structure, and when you see the employability in the administrative system, the basic idea was to turn the state into a benevolent state, a state which was trying to take care of the economic development and the development of the people. Akbar was an absolute ruler. He was very despotic. His word was law. His word was law. And he centralized all powers. Though you have different levels of branches and administrative system, the entire power in the Mughal Empire was centralized in his hand, and his word used to become the law of the land. This is where you talk in terms of a kind of a despotic rule. Though he was despotic, you can see that there was a kind of a decentralization, and this decentralization was for administrative convenience. The decentralization was for administrative convenience, with absolute concentration or centralization of power in the hands of the king. As I have told you, you have four main branches under the emperor. So now taking the provincial administration and trying to have an idea of it, the empire of Akbar, towards the close of his reign, was divided into 15 parganas. I have shown you the map here, this slide, which shows you 18 parganas, but technically there were only 15. At a later stage, you can find that he had divided and it was extended. So now we have the Mughal administrative system, which had two levels, the central level and the provincial level. And at the provincial level, we will try to have some kind of idea. So the empire was divided into 15 subhas, each having the same type of administration. They are, to mention a few, they are Agra, Allahabad, Awadh, Delhi, Lahore, Multan, Kabul, Ajmer, Bengal, Bihar, Ahmedabad, Malwa, Khandesh, Berar, and Ahmednagar. Every province was under a governor who was called the Subedar or the Sifaldar. See, we have shown as the provincial administration. The provincial administration was under the control of a Subedar or a Sifaldar. The central administration was under the control of the emperor. So the emperor was directly in contact with the Subedar or the Sifaldar, who were in charge of the different branches of provincial administration at the provinces. But officially, they were at times, they were also called the Nazims. He was either, that is the Nazim or the Subedar or the Sifaldar, he was either a member of the imperial family. That means he belonged to the kith and kin of the king. They could be sons, they could be brothers, or they could be anyone who is connected or related to the king. The provincial administration was generally given, or it was kept in their hands. Or a noble of a high rank. Mainly it was given to the members of the family. Sometimes in exceptional cases, when a noble who had put in an exemplary service for the cause of the state, and whether in the form of finance or in the form of defense, he was also, when he was holding a high rank at the central administrative level, he was also deputed as a Subedar or a Sifaldar. He was appointed by the emperor, and all this, appointments, they were just functionary. All the power that they enjoyed was at the behest of the king, and they could be terminated at any point of time, depending on the likes and the dislikes of the ruler. There was a Faujdar, there was also a Qazi, there was an Amil, and many other officials at the provincial level. And the king enjoyed, the Mughal king, especially under Akbar, he enjoyed absolute loyalty of not only the ministers at the central level, but also the officials and the bureaucrats at the provincial level. Now, trying to have an idea of the division of the provinces were divided into sarkars, and the sarkars were further subdivided into parganas. Each pargana contained several villages. And one of the most important features of the village administration is that under the Mughals is that they became an open socio-economic political unit. That is what I mean by open socio-economic political unit, is that the surplus of production, all measures were taken to see to it that the surplus of production at the village level traveled out and became a cause for the growth of trade and commerce under Akbar. And this is where you find it very interesting. A very important book is written by Professor Bipin Chandra, in which he has written about the concise economic history of India under the Mughals. And this book very clearly speaks of the importance of the village administration and the way it was transformed into an open socio-economic political unit. Okay, so the provinces were further subdivided into sarkars, and each sarkar was subdivided into parganas, and under each pargana, you had several villages. The head of the district, was called the Faujdar. He was also in charge of a small force. The Faujdar was also in charge of a small force, and this force was given the responsibility of maintaining law and order at the district level. The head of the pargana was called the Sifaldar. The head of the pargana, the provinces were divided into parganas. The provinces were divided into sarkars, and the sarkars were divided into parganas. And the head of the pargana was called the Shikdar. In towns, qazis were appointed to hear civil cases, and there was no written code. There was no written civil code. The kind of justice to a very great extent depended upon the wisdom and the moral ethics of the person at this particular level and at the Pargana and at the Sarkar level. Capital punishment was there, imprisonment was there, fine was there, mutilation was there. Mutilation means cutting off hands or legs or something like that. However, these punishments can be inflicted only with the consent of the emperor. Only with the consent of, that means law was very strict and it was very heavy. But when such kind of capital punishments were to be given at the provincial level, the consent of the emperor was very important, and without his consent, such kind of punishments could never be given. Village, as I said, village administrative system was managed by the panchayats. The panchayats was a very important system where the village headmen got involved in the administrative aspects of the village. After that, we will have to see how the military of the Mughals was organized. The Mughal military was a very powerful military. Almost all the Mughal rulers maintained a huge standing army, and maintaining this huge standing army had a demanding impact on the economy, and that was the reason there was a lot of concentration on economic development also. Basically almost all the Mughal rulers, they were expansionists. Akbar was an imperialist, Aurangzeb was also an imperialist, even Jahangir and Shah Jahan were also expansionists. So the need for maintaining a huge standing army became very important. Akbar had a standing army, and military officers were called Mansabdars. Mansabdars. You have the Mansabdari system, which was introduced by Akbar during his time, and this was basically a military outfit. Okay, it varied. There was a variation. A Mansabdar could be a Mansabdar of 500 to a maximum of 5,000. And most of these 5,000 Mansabdars were again given to the kith and the kin of the family. Okay, so the military officers were called Mansabdars, and they had to provide the king with necessary quota of soldiers. So the Mansabdar's primary responsibility was to maintain a standing army, and whenever the king demanded, they had to supply this military force or soldiers. According to Abul Fazl, there were 33 grades of these Mansabdars. 33 grades of Mansabdars. So we have an administrative system which is divided into central government, provincial government, and village level administration, which is defended by a strong military administration, strong, efficient military administration. So according to Abul Fazl, most of this, people who were maintaining army and were demanding and were supplying on the demand of the king were the torchbearers of the Mansabdars. And Mansabdari system can be considered to a very great extent as the backbone of the Mughal administrative system. And when a crisis develops in the Mansabdari system, the Mughal administrative system and the Mughal empire itself collapses. That we will discuss when we take up Aurangzeb. Why I have referred this particular point here is only basically because of the fact that I wanted you to understand the importance of the Mansabdari system, which was defending not only the state, but it was also defending or supporting the Mughal administrative structure. So you had 33 grades of Mansabdars. These officers had to supply the emperor with a fixed number of horsemen when required. Horsemen when required. The lowest officers had to supply 10, and the highest officer had to supply 10,000 horsemen. So horses became a very, very important I will try to show you a slide of this. See here, we can see the horses being trained and maintained by the Mansabdars, and you can also see some of them are riding and some of them are feeding, and some of them are giving a different kind of a training to the horses in this particular period of time. So the Mansabdari system was having a hierarchy. The lowest point was 10 and the highest point was 10,000 horsemen. The highest grades of the Mansabdars above 5,000 were reserved to the members of the royal family. Okay, so this is an important factor. Only the royal family enjoyed the higher Mansabdars, and to some extent the nobles also, because we have some nobles also at a very high rank in the Mansabdari system. The Mansabdars were, as a rule, paid in cash. As a rule, they were paid in cash, though some held jagirs. Some held jagirs for a temporary period. These jagirs were frequently transferred from one Mansabdar to another. They were transferred from one Mansabdar to another. All these Mansabdars were responsible for the maintenance of peace and collection of revenue in their respective territories. They also heard criminal cases. So, in fact, mainly revenue and judiciary of the provincial administration was in the hands of the Mansabdars, and the Mansabdari system was defending the central government or the Mughal administrative system. As I told you earlier, when a crisis develops in this Mansabdari system, which we can consider as the backbone of Mughal administrative system, a crack emerges in the socio-economic conditions, which ultimately leads to the disintegration of the Mughal Empire. That is the reason we use the word disintegration. Okay, we will just try to see one or two defects of the Mansabdari system. A serious defect in this system was that these Mansabdars did not maintain the required number of troops. Okay, this was one of the major. So on paper, it was shown a particular number was shown, but they did not maintain that particular strength of horses or troops. But at the time of checking by the emperor, they would gather men for the occasion and show the required number. This was one of the major defects to guard them against this evil or false masters. Okay, so you maintain a wrong muster role, a wrong muster role. See, there was a descriptive role that was maintained of the soldiers. At the same time, there is also a descriptive role of the horses that has been maintained. So these musters, we call them as the musters, these musters were false. Okay, if they were maintaining, if they were supposed to maintain 10,000, they used to maintain 6,000 or 7,000 and maintain a muster roll for 10,000. This was a major defect in the Mansabdari system. Akbar followed the practice of Sesha Sood. I was just telling you the branding of horses, etc. This practice was taken from Sesha Sood, and that was the reason when I was talking to you about the administration of Sesha Sood, I was trying to tell you that he was a forerunner to Akbar, but he was not entirely successful. Besides the Mansabdars, some Rajas and chiefs, okay, Rajas, the Rajput kings who were defeated in course of battle, they also used to maintain an army, and some of the chiefs who were in control of the forts, they also used to maintain armies. So at different levels, you have different different kinds of people trying to supply men and material for the Mughal administrative system as and when the king demanded. Now, trying to see the way it was organized, the imperial army of the Mughals consisted of infantry, artillery, cavalry, and elephants, and the navy of the navy was also an important aspect of these important branch was the cavalry, and the special attention was to pay. I will just show you some of the slides which are picked up, showing you. See, this is a quote of Akbar, where he's greeting the Rajput rulers and other nobles. And this photograph painting is taken from Akbarnama. And then you have another painting where young Akbar, at the age of 13, showing his first imperial act, the arrest of an unruly courtier who was once a favorite of Akbar's father. This illustration is also taken from Akbarnama. And then, as I was telling you, I'm showing you a painting where you have the horses playing a very important, which played a very important role in the Mughal army. And now I am showing you a painting of bullocks dragging siege guns uphill during Akbar's attack of Ranthambore in 1568. A siege is surround a fort and do not allow anyone or anything to come in or go out. So when the food or the requirements, the other kinds of requirements get exhausted, they are forced to open the door or they are forced to come out for a battle. So this siege was very important. In such kind of sieges, you can very clearly see that most of them were successful. In the next painting, I am showing you a religious assembly which was conducted, which used to be conducted by Akbar, and that which you see, the building which you see, was called as Ibadat Khana, and this was there in Fatehpur Sikri. Fatehpur Sikri developed to a very great extent during the times of Akbar. And the last I'm showing you in terms of buildings. This is Akbar's mausoleum at Sikandra near Agra. And here I have a slide for you which shows the way the elephants were trained and the maintenance of elephants. So now we have a fairly large collection of some of the paintings taken from Akbarnama and other sources, which have been mainly taken from the internet, which give you fairly good idea of what was the kind of conditions that were prevailing during the time of the Mughals and the kind of training that was given. Now, concentrating on land revenue. As I was telling you, that land revenue was very important. This is one quote where you can see this was the way in which certain discussions were being carried on, whether it was land or any other Mansabdari system or any kind of a discussion that was being carried on. You can see a portrait of this. So now, concentrating on the land revenue administration, Akbar's greatest achievement was the land revenue administration. This was carried out by Raja Todarmal. As I was trying to tell you, the Rajputs were defeated, but they were integrated into the Mughal service, mainly for defense and for revenue. And Todarmal was his revenue minister. Todarmal, following the precedent set by Sesha, carried out in many parts of the empire an improved system of settlement, which we call the bandobast. Okay, so this for the bandobast system, one of the important land revenue systems, you have the idea being taken from Sesha Sur by Todarmal, and this was a kind of an improved system which was which was set by Sesha Sur. Our assessment of the revenue based on the fairly accurate measurement and classification of the kind of soil. So soil was taken as a criteria, very important, sorry, very important criteria. And based on that, you have, the taxation being fixed with the farmers. The settlement, this kind of settlement was called the Raitwari. All cultivated land was measured and classified into 4 grades: the fallow, the parauti, the polaj, and the chachar, the 4 categories of land. So the polaj land was the land which was never allowed to be a fallow. The parauti was occasionally left for fallow for a year or 2. The chachar was land which was allowed fallow for 3 to 4 years. And the banjar was remaining land which was not followed for more than a period of 5 years. Okay, so this was a kind of a practice which was introduced by the Mughals in the medieval period to get a better yield from the land and a better produce. The state demand was fixed at 1/3 of the average produce. The state demand was fixed at 1/3 of the average produce, and this can be paid in cash or in kind. But Akbar preferred cash payment. The freedom was given to the farmer, but the preference of the ruler or the preference of the king was cash, especially in case of perishable articles, especially food crops and other food items which get spoiled over a period of time. In such cases, he insisted on payment in form of cash. In order to fix the cash rates, Todormal took the average actual prices during the preceding 10 years. So the the prices of the agricultural products was based on the price that each product carried for the past 10 years. So based on that, an average price was taken, and that used to be fixed as the price of the product. During famine, the state share was reduced. The state share was reduced during the famines, and on such occasions, farmers were given takavi loans. Like in the modern times, we have agricultural loans. In the medieval times also, you have, in case of famine or in case of any kind of a financial contingency, the farmers could approach the Mughal court, and these loans were called the takavi loans. And these loans were given to purchase seeds and cattle. The takavi loans were given for the purchase of both seeds and cattle. The revenue collectors were especially warned not to be oppressive with the cultivators. This is a very important factor. So the state is not a painful state. The state is a benevolent state. So the revenue collectors were asked to be liberal with the cultivators. In the beginning, revenue settlement was made annually. Annually means every year. But later on, it was made decennial for 10 years. In the beginning, it was made for every year. At a later stage, it was, and revenue settlement was for a period of 10 years. This revenue system of Todormal was, with slight modification, continued even during the time of Akbar's successors. This is very important. So we have also, we have seen different forms or different layers of administration. We have first seen the central administration, then we have seen the provincial administration. We made some observations on the village administration. We have seen the Mansabdari system. We have seen the land revenue system. We can also say that there was a lot of industrial growth in this particular period. Industries flourished under Mughal rule, and manufacture of textiles. This textile industry flourished very well, and there were major centers like Agra, Banaras, Patna, Beharampur, Bidar, etc. And you have silk industry being promoted in Sonargaon and Dhaka, and the production of shawls, Lahore, even now the shawls of Lahore are very popular and very famous. And cities like Multan, Fatehpur Sikri, Jaunpur were famous for carpet manufacturing. Paper was produced at Sialkot. Bihar was known for the production of saltpeter. So if you just see, all this indicates two things. One is that you have some kind of an industrial development, and with the industrial development, you can see that these areas turned out to be the urban centers. So you have the development of an urban life during the Mughal period. Now putting slight focus on the trade and commerce, both English and other foreign trade received a fillip during the Mughal period. Island trade was carried on by native trading classes. See, the Britishers and the Portuguese, they were coming, and the foreign trade was basically, it was promoted with the native trading classes. The native means the local trading classes. Foreign trade was concentrated in the hands of a few Arabs, Portuguese, and French and English. So you have the local traders trading with the few members of Arabs, few members of Portuguese, members of French, and the British. So this very clearly says that there was a kind of a trade, a foreign trade, which contributed to the economic development in the medieval times under Akbar. Now we can also say that there was also, if you take the accounts of people like Ralph Flitch and other English travelers who had visited Agra, they had made very interesting observations about Agra and Fatehpur Sikri, where they had compared it with London, and they called it as a very populous city, which speaks of a high level of urban life development. Okay, so when we are trying to understand the impact of the administration, we can see that the administration promoted trade, it promoted urbanization, it becomes a contributory factor for the growth of prosperous cities, and it was also able to defend famines and plagues which had come up in the years 1555 and 56 and 1595 and 98. So this is a very important aspect that we have to mention. So there was a development in the social conditions also. So in the next phase, we will be trying to, today our main focus was on the administration and the impact of Mughal administration on the economy, trade, and the state. So in the next talk on Akbar, we will try to concentrate on the culture, the society, the people, and we will link it up with the times of Jahangir and Shah Jahan, where we will try to defend the point that this was a really golden age in the medieval period. So for today, we will stop at this particular point, and we will continue from here in our next lecture. Thank you.